Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 6, 2013 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already availed yourself of the chance, please pick one up and follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda tonight, as well as a segment that we call general comments, where we will entertain any questions or comments of the general nature with respect to items that are not on our agenda tonight. It is our custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this point, I would invite everyone to please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Terrific. Thank you very much. And I'd now like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner NEUSTADT?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda tonight, which pertains to the approval of prior council meeting minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes for review and approval tonight, one set from our July 16, 2013 regular council meeting, and the other from our long-range plan meeting on July 23, 2013. Are there any changes, corrections, or comments to either set of minutes from any members of the Village Council? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Those minutes are approved. And before you know it, here we are at section 4 on our agenda. It's that opportunity for public comments of the general nature. Before we get to that, I would like to give you the opportunity to think about your comments. We have a couple of resolutions that we'd like to read tonight in honor of the Pink Heels Tour. If you came to Village Hall tonight by way of the west side of the building, you may have seen a number of very large pink trucks, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about that. And we have a special guest here tonight who also has a resolution from Springfield, and we have some members of the Pink Heels Tour here in the audience that we're going to probably try to embarrass them a little bit and bring them up here in a little bit. But let me start with the proclamation from the village, and then I'd like to ask our special guest to come up, who I'll introduce shortly. Whereas Guardians of the Ribbon, Inc., DBA, doing business as, Pink Heels Tour, is a national nonprofit organization consisting of firefighters, police officers, and leaders in the community whose sole purpose is raising awareness for the fight against cancer. And whereas the Pink Heels Tour began in September 2007 and encourages public safety professionals, local leaders, and citizens throughout the community to wear pink in honor of all women and to join forces to help them in their fight against cancer. And whereas the spirit of this campaign is to fight for those who have lost the ability to fight for themselves, asking for public support and raising understanding and awareness to all citizens. And whereas anything is possible when good people devote themselves to a cause that does so much good and benefits so many. And whereas the Cares Enough to Wear Pink campaign honors all women and recognizes the need to come together as a collective group and help with the fight against cancer, reminding future generations that people who are not affected by an illness can come together for those who are. Now therefore I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim August 6, 2013 as Cares Enough to Wear Pink Day in the Village of Downers Grove. And we'll present this to the members of the Pink Heels Tour in a moment, but I'd like to now introduce a special guest we have here tonight. Our former mayor and current state representative, Ron Sandek, is here tonight, and he also has a resolution from a higher authority.
Oh, I don't know about a higher authority. What a pleasure it is to be back at this wonderful place. Thank you, Mayor and Council. It is genuinely my pleasure to read a proclamation, or resolution really, from the Illinois House of Representatives. Whereas the Pink Heels Tour takes pink fire trucks and police cars across the country carrying the Care Enough to Wear Pink and Pink Heels movement to local communities. And whereas the Pink Heels Tour was founded in 2007 with a focus on helping women who are battling or have battled cancer. Pink Heels recognizes the importance that the women in our lives have on our families and communities. Whereas Pink Heels helps to raise awareness and funds for local women and community initiatives. Whereas in 2012, the Pink Heels Tour traveled throughout Illinois with stops including Jacksonville, Joliet, Naperville, Downers Grove, Bartlett, Aurora, and Rockford. During that time, the tour made multiple home visits to deliver flowers and hugs to women with cancer. Whereas there are currently 4 local chapters of Pink Heels in Illinois: Chicagoland chapter located in Downers Grove, Naperville, Joliet, and Northern Illinois. And whereas in 2013, the Pink Heels Tour will be in Illinois on July 3rd through 4th in Jacksonville, July 25th in Freeport, July 26th in Orangeville, July 27th in Rockford, July 28th in McHenry, August 6th in Downers Grove, August 7th in Evanston, August 8th in Bedford Park, August 9th in Bartlett, August 10th and 11th in Joliet, and August 13th through the 17th at the International Association of Fire Chiefs annual conference in Chicago. And whereas Pink Heels has been supported by proclamations by many politicians, including Senators Harry Reid, Joe Lieberman, Sherrod Brown Jr., and Governors Bill Ritter Jr., Janice Brewer, and therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 98th General Assembly of the State of Illinois that we declare August 2013 as Pink Heels Tour Month in the State of Illinois and thank them for their commitment to helping those afflicted with breast cancer. And be it further resolved that a suitable copy of this resolution be presented to Pink Heels as an expression of our esteem and gratitude.
Thank you very much, Representative. Well done. Thank you for coming out for that. In just a moment, we're going to invite up the Pink Heels Tour crew here, and I'd like you to join me in presenting our respective proclamations or resolutions, as the case may be, to them. But I know that Commissioner NEUSTADT would like to say a few words, perhaps while I'm slowly ambulating my way down.
Ambulating, good word. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say a couple of thank yous. The Pink Heels Tour has actually been in Downers Grove and in the area for a number of days and will be in the area as the days go on here for the next couple of weeks. Today, I had the privilege to offer a home visit from the Pink Heels Tour men and women to my Aunt Louise. Aunt Louise is visiting us in Downers Grove, and she is a 4-time cancer survivor. We surprised Louise with a wonderful serenade of horns and sirens on Celia Avenue today, and she was extremely surprised and grateful for the visit. So thank you guys and the gals who are probably relaxing out in the tour bus for coming by today. We have some pictures here. There's Aunt Louise signing the truck, which is named Leslie, my wife's name actually. There's Mr. Maines giving one of his famous hugs, and you can see a little bit of a crowd gathering there. Thank you, Commissioner Rankin and others who came by today. These gentlemen and women go out of their way to make cancer patients and survivors the only special thing that moment and that day, and it really does make a huge difference in their lives. So a special thank you for that. A couple other quick thank yous go to Mr. John Lampa at the Marriott Suites for providing lodging for these Pink Heels Tour members, Becky Nelson at the Downers Grove Chamber of Commerce for her hard work, and tonight Gatto's Restaurant, Chuck and Frank Gatto are providing a nice meal for the Pink Heels Tour and all their hard work today. So thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you for the extra time tonight, and good luck in the next few weeks, guys, and thank you again for spending your time in Downers Grove.
Thank you, Commissioner. Joel, want to bring your crew on down here, and we'll present the resolutions and proclamations, pose for a photo, and then invite you to the podium. I know you're really shy, but we're going to try to get you out and yell, maybe a few words. I'll work on it. So here, why don't we come on down? Ron, why don't you come on down here? I'll go on the other end. Oh, I totally screwed that up.
Where do you want?
And then there you go. Ron, you got a good idea. We'll stand behind.
Make sure we get all those heads in the camera.
All right. We'll give you guys the proclamations. There you go. We'll stand behind you there. Now Doug's happy.
Thank you.
So my career in staging never went very far. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out. Ron, thank you.
Coming around there.
Good to see you. Thank you for coming. Joel, please. Podium is yours.
It's always a scary time, me with a microphone and a closed audience. Thank you very much, Mayor, Representative Sandak, for the proclamations, the resolutions. They mean a lot to us. The Pink Heels Tour, we're all, as the resolutions read, firefighters or firefighter paramedics. Occasionally we'll let a cop sneak in, not often. And we volunteer our time. We take vacation days, trade days, and we travel the country for 2 or 3 week stints supporting women. And initially the push, the impetus was cancer, because everyone knows somebody affected by cancer. But truly it's more than just cancer. We've met people that are afflicted by MS, by strokes, by you name it, and they tend to fall through the cracks in this day and age. We kind of look at ourselves like a modern-day Johnny Appleseed. We want to travel the country in our Pink Heels tour, establishing local entities like we did here with the Chicagoland chapter in Downers Grove, so that your neighbor lady, Betty Smith, becomes afflicted with a debilitating disease. She can't work because she's taking treatments, or the treatments are making her sick. She's losing her hair because she's going through chemo or radiation. For you to be able to pick up a phone and call a local entity and say, look, Betty Smith's having a tough time. Can you guys hook her up with a wig? Because that would do so much for her self-esteem. And if you know anybody that's gone through a fight like that, you know self-esteem plays a huge part in it. So we want to establish a local entity to be on the receiving end of that call, to go out and buy a wig for Betty Smith with the money that we raised locally, to get a couple of guys like us dressed up in pink firefighter gear from head to toe and to pull up in our pink fire truck in front of Betty Smith's house and give her a bouquet of flowers and give her a wig and give her hugs and tell her we love her and tell her we're there for her. I think I'm speaking for the fellas with me. My mom, my sisters, my wives, never more than one at a time. My daughters, from birth to this moment, have taken great care of me and played a huge role in making me the man I am today. And this is an opportunity for me to repay them and to show some of the respect for what they've done for me with women in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks to you. It's really a terrific thing, and I think we've all been really impressed by how much the community has embraced the tour, been following on Facebook and other social media, all the different stops, and really well received and growing a lot since even last year. So thank you for coming back again, and thanks for all you do and the impact that you have on our community. We greatly appreciate it. And again, thanks to our special guest, Representative Sandak, for being here tonight. All right, with that, I know gave everyone plenty of time to think of questions and comments of a general nature. So we will go to item 4 on our agenda, public comments. So if anyone has any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not on our agenda tonight, then the protocol is to please come down to the podium, give us your name and your address, and we would welcome hearing from you. And again, if it's an item that's on our agenda, there will be an opportunity for public comment at that point in time. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Esther Anders, and I live at 110 Warren Avenue, and I want to make a complaint against Alliance Cab Company. On July 30th, I was supposed to be down at 6840 getting a mammogram. My cab never showed up. I got another appointment at 2:15. The cab came. The cab did not know where to pick me up. He saw me standing in front of my address and stopped and picked me up. The third cab knew where he was going. I've never had that happen. And it's kind of scary because you don't want me driving. And the only way I can get around is by cab. And I don't want any fired, I don't want anybody shot, nothing like that. But just, is there something that can be done to get the cabs when they're supposed to be there?
Ms. Anders, I'm sorry to hear of your experience. I appreciate you coming here tonight, and we're glad that you made it down here to share that experience. I've heard a couple of examples like this, maybe several examples from some residents who were in similar situations where they were counting on the cab to get them to an important medical appointment, such as yours, and have asked this same question. And while the cab companies are private businesses, we do have licenses that we have in Downers Grove with respect to cab companies, so we will add this communication that you provided to us to our file with respect to the cab companies.
Because it never happened before. This is
Well, and the
time.
fact that, you know, I sort of have a rule, when I hear it once, it might be an aberration, you hear it twice, it's a coincidence, you hear it 3 times and something's going on. So this is now the 3rd or 4th time that I've heard something similar in the last few weeks, and so we've been adding them to a file, and when the time comes for, well, certainly we can try to address it in advance by
Thank you for
communicating with the
listening.
companies.
Thank you for listening to me.
The pleasure's been ours, thank you. Other questions or comments of a general nature? Take your time, Bill. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. William Waldeck, 1409 Willard, and here at Downers Grove. Regarding the previous statement, I'd just like to make a quick comment. I'd be happy to talk to her about situations. I'm quite familiar with cab companies and Ride to Page, and it's not unusual. It's not an unusual situation. I think understanding is important. So I'd like to talk to her about that, about her particular situation. I have a lot of different issues I'd like to talk about, but I'll confine myself to one in particular tonight. I understand that several weeks ago you went into executive session to talk about collective bargaining. And since that time, you've also had long-range financial planning and the need for what you think is, or what you call an employee compensation plan. And I'd like to talk about that if I may. I'll confine my comments to what is general knowledge, to what's on social media, and what's discussed on the street, and also what is on public record. I bring this topic up tonight because the last several collective bargaining contracts were approved by council votes of 4-3. And with the departure of myself and Commissioner Schnell, those votes would now, if taken today, would be 2-3, with 2 new commissioners not knowing how they would vote one way or the other. So I thought I would address this issue so for their benefit and for the benefit of all the residents. I have reason to believe that in collective bargaining discussions that the topic of force majeure will again raise its ugly head. In the first of these contracts, it was no secret that the negative votes came as a result of and it was said, Commissioner Barnett has a better idea, which has been discussed in public media as force majeure. And I think that is a disaster. Force majeure refers to disasters, actually, for wars, riots, acts of God, like tornadoes, fires, and the like, and they're catastrophic. Incorporating such verbiage in a collective bargaining agreement is not force majeure, it's farce majeure. First of all, council and staff has addressed the catastrophic, the possibility of catastrophic incidents with reserves, the theoretical tornado going down Ogden Avenue, or even the Illinois General Assembly suddenly wanting to raid the village coffers. And in that case, the village of Downers Grove is much better set off than many municipalities to address that issue. And if that did come about, it wouldn't happen overnight, and they would no doubt, they would have to allow some time for all these municipalities throughout the state to address the issue. So it's not really a catastrophic situation as described by something like force majeure. Generally speaking, what has been proposed is that the proposal offers the union a set amount of money with the idea that if the village does quite well, that the union members get an increase. If the village finances suffer, the union members will have to take the hit as well. And this sounds like a great idea on paper. It isn't. And if I was the union, I would take the offer and be better off running down to Vegas and putting the money on red. Unions are not in the habit of accepting variable rates. It's more likely that the village will make the offer, they'll set a wage, the union will reject it, and respond with their own proposal. The union's counter-proposal, unfortunately, would probably be higher than they would normally ask, knowing what they know. So instead of asking for a 6%, they might go for an 8. Instead of asking for a 9, they might go for 12. I don't know. But they would be asking for higher, knowing that what happens is that the proposal would go before an arbitrator. Now, because the public safety employees can't strike, it does go to arbitration. The arbitrator would look at proposal A, village, or proposal B, the union, and there's no A minus or B plus. It's either A or B. And in one case, the arbitrator would be looking at a traditional contract offer that, like I say, it's traditional, it has precedence, it's legally defined, it's been done before, tried and true, not necessarily good with the comps, but he has that. And on the other hand, he has something that isn't tried and true. He has something that's experimental, has no precedence, and would probably result in future litigation or further arbitration as you go down the line. So therefore, he would probably select a union-type proposal, and this is my theory. He would accept the union-type proposal, and that would cost the village residents thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars more than a traditional. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that the union does accept the force majeure, and the village would have contracts that would be contentious in so many ways and probably would wind up in further arbitration in court. If you would base the results on a budget-type metrics, the village hasn't successfully projected any budget. Each year, the council, at the beginning of each year, the council usually has budget amendments that they have to pass because they missed the target. And that just reflects the expenses part and not the revenue part. For example, last year, the village had to do a budget amendment for the expenses. They didn't have to for the revenues, even though the revenues came in $2 million higher than expected.
Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you mind terribly, only because there's some other people waiting to speak, maybe trying to wrap up in a couple of minutes? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
I just want to, out of respect for the other people who want to speak. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, in a sense, the budget is really set by throwing a dart, taking a best guess, throwing a dart, and then at the end of the year, you move the target to where the dart is. And so, budgets would consequently be contentious. The union would likely question or covertly or overtly try to change the revenues and expenses in their favor, and the village would do so as well. What that really does is that the budget no longer becomes a tool of management, it really becomes a game between the labor situation. So that's one thing. Also, during the course of the year, every time the village spends too much money, all the expenditures, the revenues and so forth would all be subject to question by the union and however it's going to be reconciled. There's just too many questions, too many ifs. It puts the employees and the residents at odds with one another because they make money, the services don't go back to the residents, they don't get tax decreases, it winds up as pay increases, or vice versa. It's a bad idea. And I bring this forward because I don't know what's happening, and before we start getting into those type conversations, I would just hope that the new council members reject the idea of what I call farce majeure. And I would hope that the three who have put this forward have always voted for it, that then maybe a couple of them would at least change their mind. Because I think it's bad for the village and it's bad for the residents. And it's also bad for the unions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Waldeck. Other questions or comments of the general nature? Good evening.
Hey, good evening. I'm Brian Coons. This is my wife, Zaida. We live at 1149 Candlewood Drive, right across from Good Samaritan Hospital. And we wanted to voice our concern as far as airplane traffic and noise that's been going over the village. It seems like it's been increasing more and more over like the last, I would say, 2 to 3 months. And we wanted to bring this to your attention to see if this is something that's permanent or if it's just something based on temporary things going on with O'Hare. We've been hearing pretty much airplanes going over, like last Sunday, August 4th, there was probably at 6 o'clock at night, probably an airplane going over probably once every minute. And we wanted to see if this is something that's permanent and comments?
Yes, hello, I'm Saida Morello. We noticed that increase in air traffic in the last 2 months. Well, we understand that we are in between the two airports, but they're flying very low, preparing to land at O'Hare, and they're decelerating, so it's noisier and it's very low compared to what it used to be before. So we just, first of all, we wanted to just let you know that it's really affecting our quality of life, of course. And also if we could get from O'Hare any information on if it's temporary or a permanent situation. And once the new runway opens, if this is going to change back to where it used to be. And we know that there has been a complaint from other people about that. So yeah, hopefully we're not alone in this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your concerns and bringing this to our attention. We have, in fact, heard from time to time complaints about enhanced or increased air traffic, either from Midway or from O'Hare, and we've learned that it usually has something to do with changes in flight patterns when there's all of a sudden increase. And usually they're not temporary, but we do have contacts at the FAA that we can reach out to, as we have done in the past, to see if there is something that is driving a change in air traffic patterns, which hopefully is just that, temporary. And we have your name and address. If we find something out, we'll follow up with you and let you know.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. My name is Mark Toman, 1109 61st Street. And my comments do not specifically have anything to do with item C in the consent agenda. Dr. Goodman hopefully will address that on behalf of the Pierce Downer Heritage Alliance. I do speak as a member tonight of the PDHA, talking a little bit about trees and with a suggestion for staff and council regarding trees spurred by item C in the consent agenda. Dr. Goodman has been very carefully documenting, with the assistance of Nan Newland and Castine Vonderheid, the village forester, the decline of the village canopy over the last 6 years. We've done a reasonably good job throughout the history of the village as a tree city of maintaining the canopy. Since approximately 2006, that has changed. Just to give you a point of reference, the decline of mature canopy is roughly equivalent to 60 football fields of tree canopy. That translates into approximately 3.5 acre-feet of direct stormwater interception. Complete mitigation. Never hits the ground, never goes into the system. As you might recall, Washington Park, which we spent several $1 million on, when it's filled to the very top, all the way across, holds 8.5 acre-feet, I believe. So we're talking about the tree loss being a considerable stormwater mitigation loss that hopefully will be made up by the city somehow, some way. So my suggestion tonight, as a general comment, given the established benefits of trees as stormwater mitigation devices, that stormwater utility funding be used for continual annual increased purchases of trees, so that it does not impact the public works budget, but it does impact the stormwater utility, which is what these trees rightfully can be viewed as, a stormwater mitigation device. I thank you for your time and consideration, and we'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your suggestions with us. I don't see anybody jumping out of their seats for questions, but we know how to find you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments of a general nature from anyone here in the audience tonight? I want to thank everyone who has spoken for sharing their comments with us. We appreciate it. That brings us to item 5 then on our agenda, which pertains to council member reports. I'll ask if council members have any items to report out at this point in time. We'll start with Commissioner Jose.
I have no report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner RHEINTGEN.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Commissioner Barnett.
No report, Mayor.
Commissioner Olson.
No report.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. The village has received the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 2013 budget. I don't see anybody from our finance office here tonight, so they must be at home preparing next year's budget. This is the 4th year in a row that we've received this honor. It really is a significant achievement that reflects the commitment to meeting the highest principles of government budgeting, as it says here on the website. So thank you to all the hard work from our staff and to the council members who approved this budget. It's a very important thing that we continue to work forward in our budgeting, and receiving awards does show that we're doing something right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner, for sharing that. And I'll just add that I think this is something that we probably under-celebrate because it is a significant achievement. It is not one that is handed out very easily or without a fair amount of scrutiny, and yet our finance department has achieved it over and over and over again. In fact, there is a wall back in the finance department area that I think they may have to get another wall because it is reflective of so many different awards of this nature. It truly is more than a symbol, but a demonstration of the outstanding job that our finance group does here, and that is to be applauded. I appreciate you bringing it up and sharing it. I knew one of us would. And again, congratulations and kudos to them. We'd parade them out here and embarrass them if they were here. That's probably why they're not, but we appreciate it nonetheless. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, just a real quick question in light of the fact that everybody had seen the pink fire trucks in our neighborhoods. I received some communications inquiring how one goes about having the fire department, the Pink Heels Tour, come to their homes as they did the Commissioner NEUSTADT's. So if we can get some of that information out for others, I know that it seems to be a yearly event here in town that we recognize. I would appreciate that. The other, in light of the report out to Commissioner NEUSTADT reported out on about the GFOA award, again, that's something that the organizations that look at our ratings and establish our ratings look at. So it's imperative that we continue to have it. And I agree, it is something that we don't necessarily jump up and down regarding. It's almost become an expectation in many communities, but it is definitely a high award and definitely appreciated.
Commissioner, you can visit pinkfiretruck.org for more information on the Pink Heels Tour, and there is information on there how to contact them for home visits.
Well, if staff can get that out there so others that don't know where to look has the idea, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Two things from my perspective. One, I just want to remind everyone that the Downers Grove Lions Club will be hosting once again their new teachers luncheon on August 13th at noon at Downers Delight Restaurant. Now, while it's not open to the public, this is a very special event in that the Lions Club, an important not-for-profit organization here in our community, of which we have many, takes a time out to really show all the new teachers in District 58, District 99, and the private schools here in town how special they really are and how much that we value their contributions to our community in maintaining high standards, which help allow our village to get awards such as the 8th friendliest community in the nation. So just to, in advance, thank the Lions Club for doing that once again. I know the teachers always greatly appreciate it. The other thing that I want to report out on is one of the other roles that I play is as the District 3 representative to the DuPage County Stormwater Committee. And there was a meeting this morning, and there were many different items on the agenda. And just by way of background, that committee is made up of half members who are members of the DuPage County Board or appointed by the DuPage County Board, and the other half are members who are appointed representing 6 different districts, municipalities in the six different districts. Downers Grove falls primarily in districts 2 and 3, 2 being the north part of Downers Grove and 3 roughly being the south part of Downers Grove, not exactly, but close. And I have the privilege of being the representative for municipalities in District 3 on that committee. The reason I'm telling you all this is that today there was a presentation by county staff with respect to what I'm sure all of you have heard and read something about, which is legislation, primarily House Bill 1522, that is awaiting signature by Governor Quinn, that would allow DuPage County essentially to move forward with discussion and potential adoption of a stormwater utility. Now, the legislation hasn't been signed yet, but it is widely expected that it will be. The presentation was given to the Stormwater Committee. It was about what a utility is and what the county has in mind and what their timetable is. And it was very similar to the one that was given to the DuPage County Board approximately a month earlier. So I was glad that the presentation was also given to the Stormwater Committee because that committee has representatives of municipalities on it, including myself and representatives from other districts and the municipalities therein. Generally speaking, I will convey to you what the gist was because there were a lot of questions. There were a lot of questions and concerns expressed by both members of DuPage County Board, representatives from different municipalities about whether it should be done, what would be done if it was, what would it look like, what the timeline is, what sort of public engagement would there be, so on and so forth. And it is very clear to me that it is very much up in the air whether it's even going to happen, much less if it does, what it will look like and how it will impact any community, much less communities like Downers Grove or others who either have or wish to implement a stormwater utility. It's my sense that even within the county board, there is not any sense of agreement as to what to do, but this is a part of a conversation that they will be having. Importantly, it was communicated to the members of the committee by staff and by the chairman of that committee, Jim Zay, that the first step they need to take, which makes perfect sense, is to come up with some sort of a needs assessment. In other words, what is it that they have in terms of stormwater needs and level of service, what that cost is before they should realistically be sitting down and talking about how to pay for it. Let's figure out what it is that needs to be done, what are the needs, and then go to the next step. And it appears that it will take them quite some time to even finish that step, at least 6 months to 12 months, and then there will be a conversation about prioritization, how to fund it, what should be funded, all sorts of things. The bottom line is the county is stating that they are short funding with respect to their long-term projects and maintenance for stormwater within the county. And these are areas that the county is responsible for, not the village of Downers Grove. So that discussion is a ways off. Then they would go into the conversation about whether and how to pay for it, well, how to pay for it, I guess. And as part of that conversation, this legislation would allow them to discuss a potential stormwater utility. The county is very different than the village of Downers Grove and many other municipalities, and they have some unique challenges in a discussion of doing something like this. I myself raised at least 15, 16 questions from a municipal perspective of things that the county needs to think about very, very carefully as they go forward, and it was stated again and again and again, we got it, the cart's way before the horse, we're just having this conversation, we have a lot of things we have to hammer out, there will be lots of public outreach, input, reaching out with stakeholders, that commitment was made. I hope that's the case. I also hope that it will be sometime, and there'll be lots of opportunities to discuss it and provide municipal input from municipal engineers, stormwater authorities and whatnot, because this is a big deal, and it's something that we all have a vested interest in. But I came away with the impression that this is not something that's going to happen overnight, nor could it happen overnight, because they haven't even defined what it is. So we will continue to keep tabs on that, both as a municipality, both through our membership in DuPage Mayors and Managers, and I also in my role as a member of that committee. So I just wanted to share that with the rest of the council. That is a very big ticket item right now throughout DuPage, as you can imagine. So I just wanted to give you the latest and the greatest news in that regard, and I know we'll be getting more information from The stormwater subcommittee, I'm not quite sure what the name of it is, within DuPage Mayors and Managers, which is tasked in following this and staying on top of it, and making sure that the municipal perspective is well represented in whatever they might do. At the risk of not taking up more time on it, I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone might have on it, either now or at your leisure, or anyone in the audience after the meeting would be happy to talk about it a little bit further. But I wanted to share that with everyone because I know there's been some press on it, there's been a lot of conversation in the community. What is this? When is this happening? And that's the news that we're currently aware of.
So Mayor, your sense is that you're unsure whether this would also apply to Downers Grove in addition to the stormwater utility we currently have? That's not decided yet?
That is decidedly not decided yet.
Okay, thank you.
There are a number of questions, and I will share with all of you the questions that, there were 25 of them. I managed to boil them down to about 12 or 15, but I will share them with you, and these represent questions that are coming from throughout DuPage County, our sister cities throughout the county, and some of the concerns that they have. But basically the answer was nothing is decided yet.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean there was some press where you were quoted, Jim Zay was quoted, looked like you were at law, you were saying opposite things. So
well,
I just
let's say that there may have been a little bit the phrase "cart before the horse" was used at least once, where I think maybe the whole idea got out a little bit ahead of the conversations that need to take place to talk about what it is and what it might be, and what the needs are. And I think that's been leading to some of the problems, is that I think some of the reports have suggested this is inevitable, it's happening tomorrow. I don't get the sense that's even possible right now.
So there'll be more time, and I know I've heard concerns from residents that they're upset, oh, well, DuPage County, we're going to pay more, and so.
And there have been some comments, and this has raised some concern and some level of anxiety, and I would say that we're all operating with positive skepticism right now, but we have been assured that there will be a long, involved process, and of course, we would like to see something very much like what we utilized here in Downers Grove, where we did a full-blown needs assessment over many years before we even got to the serious discussion of a stormwater utility, when we developed the watershed improvement plan, and then had a conversation about what the dollar amounts were and how to go about funding it, and there was a great deal of opportunities for public input and dialogue, and we would expect nothing less as part of this process. So again, my sense is it is decidedly undecided.
Okay.
We are keeping our eyes on it, and I think that everyone ought to make sure that the what I perceive as mutual intention to be fully engaged and participatory is realized, because I think that's critical. And that's just one question, is how would it affect communities like Downers Grove that already have a utility, or those communities that may put one in the near future, because obviously that's just as important to them. And I know what my answer to that question would be, and I shared it, but they're not even at the point of making those decisions yet. They understand that that's one of many, many issues that have been raised.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure. Any other questions at this point? Again, I'm happy to. Commissioner Ricken?
Well, when we were at that one talk, that breakfast, the gentleman from the county was saying that it would be different projects than what we're doing. So I think they're talking about like broader county projects, right, with more, or is that still undetermined too? Like
part of this is
between towns.
Right, and that was what Mr. Charlton, Tony Charlton, on staff at DuPage County said, and there have been some reports from Chairman Zay about this would not be double dipping if it applied to Downers Grove. One comment has been along the lines of, well, our dollars go to county projects. Municipalities will continue to be responsible for their own projects. That's generally correct, but there's a lot of aspects to that I would take issue with. There have also been suggestions made, including by myself, that much like we have partnership credits for organizations that partner with the village to achieve better stormwater management within our community that will allow them to contribute in a different way than through a fee, that should equally apply to municipalities that either have or adopt stormwater utilities. Basically, we should be exempt from that because we are demonstrating we're achieving the same goal in our own way, and that kind of behavior should be encouraged, not discouraged. So these are some of the things that are being communicated and discussed, but again, nothing has been decided. In fact, there's a robust resistance to deciding anything because it's too early. But I just wanted to share that, and I especially want to share it at the front of the meeting rather than waiting until the mayor's report, because I know there's been a lot of discussion and some media attention to this topic.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there'll be more.
Well, I look forward to that discussion.
So we will, I know our staff is fully engaged. We have our representation there above and beyond myself, and we will continue to do it through our membership in DuPage mayors and managers and generally, because obviously it's a topic of high importance for our community given our advanced sophistication on this topic. And again, I'm happy to answer any other questions any other time. There's more to come is the short of it. So thank you for indulging me. Sure, Mr. Falish, by all means.
Frank Falish, 820 Prairie. Yeah, my question is, are they going to limit the tax to the unincorporated areas?
That's one of the questions. In fact, I think that's question number 13.
I mean, that should be, because we're already paying our share, right?
That is actually one of the questions. And again, the answer is, we don't know yet. We haven't even started the conversation. When I say we, that's the statement from the county. There are also questions such as, what about municipalities in DuPage County that have adopted the stormwater regulations for Kane County, but happen to have part of their community in DuPage? How does that affect them? Literally, there's a list of 25 questions.
Okay, and then, let's see, I had something else I was going to say.
I guarantee you that whatever the question is, I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Well, I would be happy to answer it. I'd be happy to ask it of the county when the time comes.
Okay, we've got the water bill that we're charging our tax on.
Right.
What is the county going to charge?
Excellent question. They don't have a water bill. That question actually came up this morning from one of the county board members, is how exactly is the county going to go about billing and collecting on this? They do not currently have a mechanism in place to do so. Again, big distinction between us and them.
They could put it on the tax bill.
None of this has been discussed, much less decided, but you're hitting on the very same types of questions that we will continue to ask vigilantly, because obviously all of us have a very high interest and stake in this. Thank you. I would have added them to my list, but I already have them on there. But those are two excellent questions. All right, thank you. Terrific. Then let's move to item 6, public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight, so we will move to item 7, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any items on the consent agenda? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully, Commissioners, and staff. I'm Gordon Goodman, and currently we're living in Boulder, Colorado, but I had to come and have some dental work done today, and I'll go back tomorrow. And a very fortunate coincidence, you were discussing some of my favorite topics tonight. So I wanted to comment on the item C of your...
Is that what your day is called?
The purchase of additional trees through the Suburban Tree Consortium. I'm very pleased to see you moving ahead with this recommendation. I noticed that it's a very efficient use of funding, and it looks like by raising the amount that you're spending by a little less than 25% from to $120,000 to $149,900, you're going to be able to increase the number of trees by a third. The number of trees to be purchased goes from 375 to 500. So I was wondering if we were getting the same quality or type of trees, or what the explanation of this increased efficiency of the money spent is. But I think in any case it's a very good use of the available funds that you say are there. The second point I wanted to make was that as a result of the discussion at the end of last year, when you approved the initial resolution of participation in the Suburban Tree Consortium, Director Newland and Forrester van der Heide were kind enough to schedule a meeting with some of the members of Pierce Towers Heritage Alliance, and I was there. We discussed how you could find ways that it might be possible to plant more trees. One of the problems the staff recognizes is that trees are planted in front of houses, and you have to depend relatively strongly on the residents to care for those trees. They need attention, and if you plant them in front of a house where the resident doesn't want a tree in the parkway, the result is not good. And so there are also a limited number of parkways and locations on parkways in the village that don't have trees presently and would be suitable for planting of trees. So as a result of our discussion, the staff was inspired to actually consult some of the residents in locations where the parkway would be suitable for a tree, but there isn't one presently. Approximately 1,600 such locations seem to exist in the village. Actually, I guess it was approximately 2,100 was originally identified, and the staff contacted 500 of these 2,100 residents, and she got responses from about 20% of those, a little over 100, and 25 of those people said, yes, we'd like trees, and as a result, the staff identified 34 new locations where trees could be planted in parkways. So I think that that kind of initiative on the part of the staff is very valuable, and as I say, there are 1,600 more such locations that the staff might look at. In any case, as a result of your item, I sent a communication to Director Newland and Forrester van der Heide and asked if we could meet again and talk about other creative ways in which the village can find locations and increase the number of plantings. Because as Mr. Toman remarked, we are falling behind in the number of plantings as compared to the number of tree removals that have gone on over the last 6 years. Roughly 600 more trees have been removed than replanted, and we are now experiencing the emerald ash borer problem and some other stresses on the tree situation. So I'm very encouraged that we can look forward to sometime in September when I come back to Downers Grove for an extended period of time, meeting with your staff again and discussing this important issue. And I just wanted to say cheers and thank you for considering this and hopefully approving it tonight for more tree plantings in the village in the rest of this year. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Goodman. We're glad that we were a stop on your tour, and we caught you while you were in town. Always good to see you. Appreciate it, and always appreciate your level of engagement on this topic. Thank you for sharing that. Other questions in the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda?
Frank Felish, 820 Prairie. I might caution the committee to, when they plant trees, not to plant ornamental trees. There's a problem on Elm Street at Prairie. If you go north on Elm Street, there's a row of houses that have, there are 6 ornamental trees, which are small, very dense, and the branches are low. And the wind goes uphill, and it blinds out that problem. It's amazing there hasn't been an accident there. But I think that that should be watch. Now, a normal tree you do have a trunk, and then the limbs, as it grows, will get higher. So that that would alleviate the problem. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Falish. Other questions or comments from the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, any questions or comments from members of the Village Council with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda?
Mayor.
Commissioner Olson?
Dr. Goodman asked a question earlier in his remarks about the value, the trees, that it was, the cost was increased by a smaller percentage than the increase in the number of trees, and just, are we getting a better deal? Is the quality of the trees different? Are they different species of tree? So just wanted to pose that question.
Sure, the quality of the tree remains the same, high quality stock from nurseries that meet our standards, and it's just a simple concept of a scale economy or a volume discount. Your money goes further if your order is larger.
I see. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 8, our active agenda. We have one item on our active agenda tonight. Item 8A, do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance authorizing a second extension of a final plan development amendment for plan development number 31 for additions to the existing parking garage and the construction of a new 6-level parking garage at 3500 Lacey Road.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments from the audience? Any questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. That brings us to our first reading, or the workshop portion of our meeting, where items are presented for discussion and consideration and potential action at a later point in time. As is the custom, I will turn over this portion of the meeting and the numerous items that we have to go through tonight on our first reading, our workshop agenda, to our village manager, who will then introduce each item or have a member of staff do so. Good evening.
I'm happy to do so. There are actually 7 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is consideration of an ordinance proposing the establishment of a special service area. And here to give us more information on this agenda item is our village attorney, Enza Petrarca.
Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. An ordinance has been prepared proposing the establishment of SSA number 6 for certain unincorporated areas near Fairview Avenue and 39th Street. The properties are either within the Fairview Fire Protection District or adjacent to the district. As most of you know, the village has been providing fire and EMS services for this area for several decades. However, unfortunately, within the past several years, the Fire Protection District has been unable to pay the village for the cost of providing those services. The creation of this SSA will establish a sustainable funding source for these services, since the property tax levied will be for the amount needed to pay for the cost of these services. As part of the SSA establishment process, the village will hold a public hearing on October 15th, and that will also start the 60-day objection period. At the close of the objection period, roughly about mid-December, the village council will be presented with an ordinance establishing the final SSA. I should also note that the DuPage County passed a resolution last month consenting to the creation of this SSA in the unincorporated areas. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
And just one final note, this is a high priority action item that dates back several years, was discussed as part of long-range planning beginning in 2009. This action, once it comes to fruition, creates a permanent and sustainable funding solution to an ongoing issue, and we have been partnering with the leadership at the Fairview Fire District to make this happen. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Any comments or questions from members of the audience with respect to this item, proposed establishment of special service area number 6? Questions from the council? Commissioner Olson?
Mayor, as I recall, when this was presented to the county, this special service area includes a portion of the village of Downers Grove, the park. I can't remember the name of the park.
It does. It does include, the state law requires if a municipality is establishing an SSA, within an unincorporated area. It also technically requires a municipal parcel to be included. Therefore, Whitlock Park is included in this SSA.
Does that have any impact on
It does not.
Whitlock Park or the Park District?
It does not, and we have discussed this with the Park District. It's simply a formality, a technicality within the law. We just did not want it to be invalidated because of that, so we didn't choose to incorporate a portion.
Okay, but the Park District's not going to receive adverse impact by this?
The property in
exempt.
question is exempt, and
Right.
the Park District has really stepped up to help us on this issue once this issue was identified and furthering the partnership we have with the Park District.
Thank you.
Appreciate you dotting the i's and crossing the t's on this. It's been too long in the making to have a glitch due to technicality. Other questions or comments from members of the council with respect to this item? Hearing none, next item, please.
The next item is further discussion and consideration of an update to the bicycle and pedestrian plan. You may remember, I think it's a few months ago, that we had an initial first reading of this. Then it made a brief appearance on an active agenda, and we wanted to make sure that all council members were present to have a little further discussion on the bike and pedestrian plan update. Director Newland could provide additional information if requested, and I do know that there's at least one gentleman who's been participating in the planning process who is here this evening. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. As the manager mentioned, this was presented previously, and then we took it to a point where all of us could participate, and here we are tonight. But if there are any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the proposed bike plan, we welcome your comments at this point in time. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tuller and commissioners and staff. I thought I'd read a paragraph from the start of the bike plan. My name is Bill Chalberg. I live at 1132 Curtis, and I'm a member of the Downsville Bicycle Club and the club's advocacy chair. But this paragraph kind of sums up the value of the plan. Streets are safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. Streets that are safer for bicyclists and pedestrians are also safer for drivers. Adding bike lanes to streets has been shown to reduce crashes among all roadway users and to calm vehicle speeds. Slower speeds are in turn more inviting to pedestrians and bicyclists. This sequence leads to a street network that becomes a more hospitable environment in which to live, work, and play. So that made me think about the first time I saw the bike lanes on Dunham, which has been quite a few years, and I thought, what is that? And then I saw the little short one in Warren, and I thought that was crazy. You can tell I didn't know anything about the calming effects of bike lanes, because even that buffered bike lane on Dunham, if it had no cyclists in it, it slows traffic down. That's a benefit. This summer, I've been using Dunham quite a bit. The bike club has kind of a casual ride on Saturday mornings, and we get in and out of town on Dunham. And so that bike lane is great. But the last 2 years, I've ridden from the northwest side of Chicago down to 35th and Michigan, down Elston Avenue's bike lane, hooks up with Milwaukee Avenue and gets you down to Kinsey and into the Loop. So I've become a convert. A bicycle lane is a fabulous thing. I also became aware that there's 1% of the population that will ride their bikes anywhere. About 7%, which includes me, are comfortable, although some of that 7% isn't real comfortable on streets. 30% of the people aren't going to ever ride their bikes. That leaves about 60 that would like to try it, and having a safe place to ride is good. One quick anecdote I heard from the mayor of Indianapolis at a meeting in Washington. Indianapolis has vastly increased the number of bike lanes, and a woman stopped him one day and said, "You know, Mayor, I was in my car the other day, I had to stop at a stoplight, and I'm looking right across at a woman on a bicycle." And the mayor said, "Yes, and that woman was not in front of you in a car." So I'm just here to say the Bike Club wants to support this plan and helping to get it implemented, and it'll make Downers a great, even better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chalberg. Appreciate your engagement on this issue, as well as the Downers Grove Cyclist Club. Other questions or comments with respect to this item 9B? Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Council and Mayor. Glad to be with you. My name is Ryan Gleason. I'm a non-resident, however, a frequent consumer of local Downers Grove businesses. I guess specifically two questions was, in my original reading, I guess I misread what it had said, but specifically under the key findings of the strength, it states that prior Metro studies found Downers Grove to be among top 10 for bicycle use. Do you know how old that study is for one and for two? Is that strictly just the town itself or the areas around of which Metro is interacted in Downers Grove?
I think our Public Works Director may know the answer to that question.
The last comprehensive count of boardings and ways to get there was done in 2006, so they're due for some updates, but they've compared us to other Metro stations throughout the Chicago area. And also, we have a high percentage of people that walk to our station as well.
Okay. And then my second question is, because I'm just not familiar, I'm familiar with when the bike path was started a little over a decade ago. What was the original plan with that? Is that original plan available to the public of the way it was supposed to be executed?
I think I understand your question, but would you mind restating it again just to be sure?
For when the original bike path plan came out a little over 10 years ago, is that available to the public or how it was supposed to be executed and if it was fully executed to the extent of what it was planned?
I think I can probably answer the first part. I'm sure that the original plan is available to the public just like anything that's available to the public. If it's not already on our website, it's available. And then I'll let Nan address the second part.
We have implemented about 70% of all the recommendations in that original plan. Some of them we will be reconsidering. Some of them were reconsidered as part of the plan. But one of the recommendations of the updated plan is to convene a steering committee to help with the implementation. So it would include people like Bill, who was on our steering committee for the plan, looking at all these issues and helping us come up with recommendations that we will again bring before council to implement and have a community discussion about them as we proceed.
Thank you. And thank you for your questions. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Yes,
Good
Dr.
evening
Goodman.
again, Mayor Tully, commissioners and staff. I'm still Gordon Goodman, and I was here first time we had a first reading of this, and I was a little concerned that it might not come rapidly to the council's attention again. I'm very pleased to see that it has, and I'm strongly supportive of your adopting the plan as it's been developed. I had a couple comments. The first is one of the particulars of the original bike plan involved utilization of the NIGAS right-of-way, separating our village and Woodridge. That part of the plan foundered, and I'm hoping that maybe it's one of the things that can be reinvestigated. I think using such open space right-of-ways as that NIGAS right-of-way is a very good feature. I think that since that original plan was adopted, the county has moved ahead with some very good bike planning and implementation too, and I'm glad to see that that's integrated into this new updated plan. I particularly like the fact that one portion of the bike plan for the county does utilize some of the unconstructed rights-of-way for village streets, for streets in the township and the village. I think that's an excellent use of many of these unconstructed rights-of-way that were originally planned for streets, but for which the streets have not been built. I think it's a much better use of those for pedestrian and bike access than to sell them off to the neighboring landowners. If you can keep continuous such unconstructed rights-of-way, they provide very good connections within the village. And there is a a very nice feature of sidewalk that goes through the center of blocks up on the northwest side of town. I'd like to see more attention to that possibility in the future. In particular, I think that there's an important component of the planning for pedestrian, particularly pedestrian circulation, that doesn't reach the level of recommendations in the current bike plan, but by looking at the first part of the document, particularly the section on existing conditions and the discussion of being a pedestrian in Downers Grove, on the first page of the existing conditions, we see there are some very good ideas there, and I'm hoping, in light of the discussion we had the first time this was first read, that these ideas that are there for integrating the need for pedestrian networks into the planning process and subdivision control process and the Plan Commission's deliberations will be carried forward, even though it's not a specific recommendation of this bike plan. In particular, the paragraph entitled "A Commitment to Walkability" sums that up very well and could be a section of recommendations. It's certainly an important component in this plan. The village values its walkability and is motivated to further improve on it, and so on. I think that this, particularly the fact that it is important to integrate land use that support the active lifestyle, such as neighborhood-based commercial development, are included in the comprehensive plan that you've adopted, which puts shops within easy walking and bicycling distance of the residents. They're very important adjuncts to the particular transportation improvements that are itemized in the recommendations of the plan, and I hope that the council and the rest of the village realizes that this is just one component of what the village is doing to improve the walkability as well as the bicycle connectivity of the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Other questions or comments on this item from any members of the audience? Very well, I will open it up to questions or comments from members of the Village Council. Members of the Village Council have any questions or comments with respect to this item? Commissioner Neustadt?
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot of things in here about connectivity to not only our own existing paths and routes, but also to our neighbors. I think this is an opportunity for our leadership team to bring it up at DuPage mayors and managers to see what our other neighboring communities are doing with their bike plans and bike paths, where we can maybe connect and get some folks in and out of town a little bit safer. As Mr. Chalberg likes to say, you know, biking on Dunham is great, but where do you go after that? I think up on the south side, down on the south side of town is a little bit challenging. I was just going through the appendix again and looking at some of the different types of roadway kind of change for parking, for bike lane, buffered bike lanes. There's some interesting options there for roadways that we already have. And I think by accepting this plan, it gives us the ability to use it as a tool when we are looking at reconstructing streets, when we're looking at repaving streets, and how to maybe change that around. The one issue I want to make sure is very clear is that this is just a plan without any budgetary connection to it. So any of these items that may be expensive or cost more than than we're budgeted for already, it could turn into a high priority action item or a series of high priority action items to get us to a point where some of our roadways would be more friendly, bike friendly. So that would be something for this council to consider in the next few years. I think altogether the plan shows that we're a pretty friendly community for bikes and pedestrians, but we can get better. And a big part of that is mapping and communication and having places for folks to park their bikes, especially in our downtown. We've gotten better at that as well with more bike racks, not only by the train station, but at other spots around the downtown area too. So I look forward to hearing my council colleagues' comments, but I think that the way the recommendation stands now, there's a lot of good ideas in there. By accepting the recommendation, it allows us to work and use this as a tool for the future and how we operate bikes and pedestrians around our village. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Olson?
I certainly agree with what Commissioner Neustadt just stated. I think accepting this plan allows us to use it as a guide, and as we think about how we can improve our community and make it more friendly for pedestrians, more friendly for bicyclists. I know I frequently walk to the train station, will walk to downtown, and within walking distance of downtown, other places in town, jogging frequently around town. You might see me around once in a while. So it's definitely something that I'm concerned about and wish to improve. There's a lot of good ideas in here, and just like to highlight a couple things that I think I regard as particularly important. On the pedestrian side, beautifying our informal pedestrian spaces. It gives the example of the alley between Ballydoyle and access to the parking deck between Main Street and the parking deck. And that's a great example of having a space that is very pedestrian friendly. It looks good for the village. It attracts people to our downtown, and it just makes it a more friendly community. And I think that if we have more pedestrian spaces that are attractive and are places that people want to walk, it encourages more people to come to downtown or other parts of town. I think bike racks, whether they're in downtown or whether they're at other major regional centers of employment, that is something that I view as important. People more and more, especially younger people, do want to have the opportunity to ride a bike. They want to have the opportunity to walk, and I think that it's important that we are friendly to those people and allow them the opportunity to park their bike once they reach their destination, and especially in a community like Downers Grove, where we have many people who live within biking distance of our downtown. Almost the whole village, depending on your ability and your willingness to cross some of the major streets, is within biking distance. So I hope that we can move forward on that, and as we go forward into the budget cycle, consider this. One concern for me that I've heard from residents is there's a recommendation along 55th Street and Main Street to remove lanes of traffic, and this is, for me, that's something that would be of a concern. At this point, of course, I'm sure that would require coordination with DuPage County, as 55th Street's under DuPage County control. But I see that as a concern, and I see a concern if we were to remove the center turn lane on Fairview Avenue as well. So those are issues that I think would require a great deal of further study to make sure that we continue to accommodate the automobile traffic that's both within our community and moving through our community conveniently, because I certainly don't want to constrict the flow of traffic throughout town or create excessive traffic jams, especially in the times of day like the rush hour in the morning and the evening. However, I think the idea of having on-street bicycle facilities, for example, on Dunham Road, and extending the current facility that's down on the south end, and that's something that I think it would be possible given the current street configuration, and hopefully when we are reconstructing that street in the future, we can look at that and possibly give a little bit of extra room for bicyclists to have an easier, more comfortable ride. So I think that this plan is an important guide. I look forward to working with my colleagues on the council, hearing from residents like Bill, Gordon, others who've been around and who use bicycles, but also recognize that we need to, we certainly don't want to limit traffic around town or create traffic jams. That's not the idea of this plan. The idea is we want all types of traffic, whether it's pedestrian, bicycle, or automobile traffic, to be able to operate safely and conveniently in town. So I think that's the idea of this plan. I'm excited about it and look forward to working with my colleagues to see what we can get done over the next few years. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm looking forward to dialogue here as a workshop part of the thing as opposed to little speeches. Let me start by saying I like most of what's in this as a set of recommendations. I'm a little concerned, and I want to talk a little bit more amongst ourselves about process. I mentioned it the last time this was on our agenda, and for me still, my opinion about timing is similar still. We are currently talking through some planning issues, and I personally hold out a lot of hope for a couple of them that talk about the street design and sectional typical sections for our roadways that address things beyond roadway, that address pedestrian traffic and bike traffic. And so, when Commissioner NEUSTADT points out the budget concerns and Commissioner Olson points out some of the road diet issues as they're referred to in there, because it is in my mind, a very live current project that we're talking about 3 or 4 other things that are very much related to this. I don't really like the idea of sort of accepting this at this point. I'm not talking years, I'm talking months, because we're going to sort this out in the next couple of months. Because I don't want to set up any expectations that aren't real. When we start saying it's a guide that allows us to, whatever, finish that sentence, it's a set of recommendations where it doesn't allow us or prevent us from doing anything. And the subject matter is one that is woven into the discussions that we're having in LRP about sidewalks. It's one that's woven into the subjects we're talking about with street design. And I suspect that there's going to be some sort of additional decision-making by this group over the next 2 or 3 months that would affect much of what we would want to be content in this, as if we were adopting it as a guide or a plan for the next 5, 10 years, whatever the length is. It is obviously, as Jeff said, something that doesn't have any budget with it. And I think we all that are in this every day know that. But there's a risk when we adopt a plan that has a bunch of recommendations that don't have power of budget or even power of priority with them. And I personally am hopeful that, frankly, that our discussions about sidewalks and street design are going to lead to us saying that we want to set a long-term goal of implementing an enormous part of this and actually dedicating the seriousness of budget behind it. But that discussion is right in front of us. And so from where I sit, I would prefer to kind of delay any sort of formal acceptance of this by the body until we sort through that over the next couple of months. It's make sure that I'm clear for everybody that's listening and also for my colleagues. That's not a criticism of 90% of what's in here, because I frankly think it's a lot of really good recommendations. And I would suggest that you'd see many of those recommendations in certainly my comments as it relates to our LRP and setting our priorities. So I'd like us to just kind of hold off a little bit on this, and then when we do get to the point of accepting it in a a noted form, that there's some things that are seriously part of our planning and others that just really aren't, so that we're not setting expectations out there that are false. I mean, biking on Dunham is great, but then where do you go from there? Yeah, exactly. No kidding. It doesn't go wherever you put white stripes. It goes where you've dedicated the resources behind your engineering and your planning and your budgeting to actually do something about it. And I remain hopeful we will, but I don't want to set any false expectations or just give us a document that we have to kind of constantly explain in budgeting we didn't have money to do this, that, or the other thing. So I'm enthused by the plan and like the plan, even though it sounds like I'm very negative, because I just want to hold off a little bit on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
Well, I agree with many of the comments my colleagues have made. There's some really interesting stuff in here. Some of the things that I really like, pedestrian safety and crosswalk safety is something that I think is important, and I think our downtown would benefit from some of these ideas. such as guide signs. They suggest doing countdown signals, that there are no countdown signals on Main Street between Maple and Franklin. Pedestrian refuge islands for major street crossings. I think that's an awesome idea. Rectangular rapid flash beacon. So when you're going to go across that crosswalk, you press that button and it flashes. So we all know that on Main Street, people are standing there waiting to cross and no one's paying attention, and that person is, you know, putting their life at risk to cross. So I think that would be a great addition. And then having a leading pedestrian interval so that they have more time to get across the street. I will say, in regards to Commissioner Olson's comments about Fairview, I had a similar concern that taking away a turn lane to add a bike lane, that we should be considering that very carefully. And also, in regards to what Commissioner Barnett was saying, a lot of these recommendations in this plan are very well tied into the concept of changing our right-of-way standards that we talked about in long-range planning, and also some of the sidewalk concepts we talked about. So I think there is a benefit to kind of formulating that plan before we necessarily accept this. Maybe we just wait a little bit while we kind of set that, make our decisions about long-range planning. So that's my 2 cents, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I won't repeat what has been said by a lot of my colleagues, so I will just go straight to the suggestion that we hold off accepting it. And I fully appreciate and understand, I think Commissioner Barnett articulates a good reason why one might want to do that. But I guess, you know, obviously this is a workshop, so I'll consider it a dialogue and think about it. And it may be 6 of this or half dozen of the other, because we're only talking about a short period of time anyway. But I've always kind of viewed this as a set of recommendations for, here are things we'd like to have, whether they're possible, can be funded, can be adopted, or realistic, or whatnot, is not necessarily determined. I view this as more of a resource, as a guide, as something to consider when we're either trying to figure out what our right-of-way standards ought to be, whether or not we're going to vacate unconstructed right-of-ways, as Dr. Goodman brought up, whether we're going to make this something that we reach out and coordinate with the communities on. So I think it has a whole lot of aspects beyond our right-of-way standards, which I think would be rather ambitious to think we're going to resolve that for the next 20 years in the next 3 months. I view this as more something that whether we use the word receive or accept, we have it, it's completed, it provides some guidance, and then we can use it in a variety of different settings in deciding the things that I just mentioned and more. So I would like to have that tool available, to me at least, as a policymaker, in discussing right-of-way standards and discussing whether or not to vacate parcels and working with other communities and talking about pedestrian issues. When there are construction projects that are done, whether we're dealing with the county or IDOT or whomever, we have something that we can turn to and say, oh, by the way, what does this say about that? It may influence how we go forward on it. So I view it as a resource that whether we wait now or not, I'm already turning to it for the discussion, so we might as well accept it, in my opinion. And in that respect, I want to give it more status than the example I'm about to give, but in some respects it's similar. We had a long study some time ago with respect to a potential performing arts center, and there were a lot of recommendations, including locations and funding and all kinds of things. And I don't think there was any expectation the mall's going to be built next week. I think there's a valid point that is made, is we want to make sure that expectations are managed, and that once it's accepted as opposed to adopted, that, you know, so is written, so shall it be done. And I get that. It's an important concern, but I think as long as we make it clear that it's a recommending document, it serves as a resource, I think it's something we ought to accept and recognize as being a resource, and then use it when the occasion presents itself, or not. No different than the Performing Arts Center study, which is a recommendation. to do something if the opportunity presents itself. Hasn't happened yet because the opportunity hasn't presented itself. Or when we get recommendations from any number of our recommending boards and commissions, sometimes we agree with what they say, sometimes we don't, sometimes we take parts of what they've recommended and change them around a little bit. And that's kind of how I view this. So while I understand and appreciate and agree that we need to manage expectations so that, once it's accepted, it isn't now a document that all particles of ink displayed in the page must be met with some level of reverence. I think I view it more as a very useful, very well, in-depth, comprehensive tool that I think we can rely upon and utilize in a variety of different aspects. But if we're only talking about a few months, I don't know if it makes that much of a difference one way or the other. But I'll continue to think about it. Commissioner?
Yeah, I just wanted to take an opportunity to respond to some of what Commissioner Barnett said and what you said, Mayor Tully. I think Appendix A, or the plan implementation, just before Appendix A, does state specific funding, but it also states specific dates. And I recognize what Commissioner Barnett is concerned that these are dates that are outlined in the plan, and I certainly don't want to set false expectations, and I agree with that concern. But on the other hand, I think these are very, very positive recommendations, and I hope we can at least consider them in our long-range planning discussions in the future. So it is, and I look forward to talking further with Commissioner Barnett on this idea, but I do want to point out that there is a portion of the plan that does include specific dates, and I don't, I guess I see the concern.
I view as recommendations as well.
Yeah, but I think could be perceived as, they're listed on a column that's titled performance measures. Right. So, okay, well, so spring, conduct task force meeting quarterly beginning spring 2013. If we accept it, okay, well, the task force meetings haven't started yet, right? Presuming they haven't. So we
don't have a task force.
We're underperforming according to the plan. And so I don't want to set an expectation that this is our expectation of how we're going to perform under this plan. But I also don't want this to go by the wayside. And that's very important to me, that it not just be set aside because we can't meet, or we may not meet some of these metrics.
Understood, Commissioner, and that's a fair point. And that's the problem with specific dates, is they can be interpreted that way. But I guess all I'm saying is I just don't view it, and I understand other people could view it that way, and that's Commissioner Barnett's point. As metrics, we aren't setting some bar that we now have to achieve and put a man on the moon by the end of the century or the end of the decade or anything like that. That's what we're talking about. But I duly noted. Commissioner Durgan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I apologize for not chiming in earlier. In light of the discussion about construction projects and pedestrian crossings and that, as many know, the Main Street south of 63rd to Robbie Road, I believe it is under reconstruction. And in that segment of reconstruction, repaving, developing sidewalks and curbs, there's a major pedestrian crosswalk for the Downer South School. And I know when we originally spoke about this was something that I had brought up. There's a state law now that is being enforced heavily throughout the state of Illinois, ticketing drivers for not obeying pedestrians in the crosswalk. And I'd like to know if there's any plans by the county or by the village of Downers Grove, because the construction is being done now, if there's any plans to put in a pedestrian crossing there with a flashing light other than just a faded caution pedestrian crossing straight ahead or about. And it's an intersection of Main and Oxford. And I know that there's a number of students that do walk from both sides of the street, but mostly it's the east side of Main heading west to the school because that's in a no bus zone area because of distance. And I would bring it up on here because we're talking about it. I didn't know where else to bring it up under our new agenda, so appreciate the opportunity to do so.
Sure, thank you. Other questions, comments, discussion, dialogue? Sure. Commissioner?
Yeah, I wouldn't quarrel with anything you said, Mayor, which doesn't happen very often, but hey, it's first for everything. Can we, my concern is just this expectations issue. I hate the idea of us taking this document, adopting it, and 6 months from now somebody says, hey, how come you're not doing what you said you were going to do? But there's a ton of really good stuff in there, which I think to Martin's point, and probably everybody's thinking, is stuff that whether it's adopted next week or not, is stuff we're going to all wish we were referring to as we go forward. Is there any reason that you can't just, chop this thing off and say we're accepting everything and putting it into the minutes, ahead of the plan implementation and sort of leaving it at that? You start to set a real clearer picture, a much clearer picture, in my opinion, that is, all these are ideas that we ought to have in our thought process as part of our consideration as we go forward on whatever subject matter it is. Just don't tell anybody that we're sort of taking an approach that says we're going to try and implement it in 10 years. I guess that's my, it probably sounds like I'm hanging up on nothing because ultimately everything's predicated on the idea of time and money, but I just want to be clear to people, that's all. Things have a way of coming back and being waved around with various motives.
Yeah, fair point, and if it were a matter of simply taking out the specific dates, and just keeping things in short term, medium term, and long term, then that, I think, solves the issue because there are recommendations for things to do in the short term, and short term can be the word tomorrow, which of course one never gets to. And we don't want to do that, but I also understand and appreciate that we don't want to set dates that have already passed for implementing something. That doesn't make any sense. I think we want to utilize this document and not create false expectations, so let's find a way to do both.
Yeah, I absolutely, as negative as I sound, I want this to be part of what we're talking about as we go forward.
I think it will be, but regardless. So, there's the Rubik's Cube.
Well, Mayor, I just comment that the only portion that sets specific dates is this plan implementation section, pages 43 through 46.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it is just recommendations in short, medium, and long term.
Right.
Pull out those pages.
Perhaps we could get at a couple of these issues by making a few changes to the plans, including removal of specific dates and just reworking that section to talk about the order in which things would take place. Also, maybe inserting some language that explains, maybe in some more detail, how a plan like this is used, because the reality is we have so many plans with so many different angles and interests that we consider. A lot of the plans have recommendations that at first blush may be contradictory. We pride ourselves on and solutions instead of or solutions here at the Village of Downers Grove, meaning that we have a history of taking apparently conflicting things and turning them into both. And so it's true we have plans that say perhaps we should widen streets like 55th and Fairview to provide better vehicle access and flow. At the same time, we would have a plan that says maybe we should reduce that to make it more bicycle friendly. The challenge for us as a community is to find ways to do both and borrow from elements of each. So the concept of removing the dates, just making sure that we aren't setting false expectations, explaining how we use these plans and providing some context of how sometimes apparently conflicting plans and recommendations can be worked through in design processes might address the concerns that the council expressed tonight.
I think it's a good suggestion. I'll be careful. If the standard is not going to be both, then you know it's right around the corner, all.
Yes, we're getting pretty close to that in many categories anyway.
Anything else for the council on this topic? No, thank you. All right, next item, please.
The next item,
C.
Item C is a consideration of a final plat of subdivision for the property at 4101 Lindley in 913 40th Street. And here to present background information on this petition is our Community Development Director, Tom Daybreiner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Resolution has been prepared to permit a final plat of subdivision to subdivide a 50,000 square foot property from 3 lots into 2 lots for the property commonly known as 4101 Lindley Street and 913 40th Street. And this is the approximate location that we're talking about, with the pins locating the 2 properties. We'll take a look at an aerial here. 40th Street running east-west at the north end of the 3 properties, really, outlined in yellow, and Lindley running north-south at the southwest corner. This is an indication of one of of all 3 lots right now as they're currently laid out. One of the things that you should notice is that lot 2 and 3 actually pass right through both of the structures, which is not something that we would generally encourage today, or allow for that matter at all. For that reason, we do think that it's a good idea to change the lot line configuration here, and this is what's being proposed, lot 1 and lot 2. That takes care of that one problem, of course, but also leads to the potential demolition of the 40th Street home and the rehab of the Lindley Street home as proposed. This would take, again, 3 buildable lots and reduce those down to 2 buildable lots. Under the proposal, all lot width and depth requirements are met. Public utility and drainage easements would be provided. The petitioner would pay a fee in lieu under certain circumstances for 1 tree along 40th, and then future sidewalks in the area. There are a couple exceptions that are being requested. First of all, the right-of-way width requirement here is for 70 feet wide, but the existing street is 66 feet. We think that's an appropriate exception. Also, right-of-way improvements that would typically be required for curb and gutter we don't think really makes sense here because they don't exist along the streets to date, and there are no plans to add these. Again, we think it's an appropriate exception. The Plan Commission met on July 1st to consider this petition, agreed unanimously to support it. Staff concurs. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. DeBron. Any questions from the audience on this item? Please, sir. You can come on the podium and give us your name and address. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, Frederick, 916 40th Street, and that property is across the street from me, and our whole block, about 7 or 8, actually there's 6 houses on our block, but about 8 houses, we do flood, that whole area floods. And I know there's been talk before about making that piece of property a retention pond, because that thing floods pretty bad. And I know that they say they're going to, help control the flooding and grade it right and all that, but I know they're going to fill it in, they're going to raise everything up, and it's just going to make it worse for everyone else on the block. No matter what, that's what I see. They did that 6 years ago, or actually it's 8 years ago. They approved a flag lot next to us, and that's when we really started flooding real bad. They cleared all the trees off the lot, and then everyone on the street flooded. That was in 2006, and it's been just getting worse since. I know Public Works is involved with all of this right now. They're trying to, come up with some ideas, but I think that whole piece of property would be better off just being a big retention pond. And that's pretty much a consensus of everyone in our little neighborhood there. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for coming and sharing that with us. 2 things. First of all, you just pointed out another reason why they've never liked flag lots. And I'm glad that we don't have the ability to approve them anymore. But second, the proposals before us right now is to consolidate 3 lots into 2. The next step is the one that you're anticipating, is if someone were to actually build on it, how would the new construction address the various different stormwater requirements that are mandated by county ordinance. And believe me, we appreciate that, although we're kind of not there yet on that issue. Right now, someone's just asking us, can I refigure these lots from 3 into 2, and we generally favor consolidation like that into something that makes more sense. It looked like somebody bumped the arm of the person that was drawing it the first time and kind of came up with something goofy. But we understand what you're saying and anticipating what may be down the road, although we have to focus on what's currently before us. I do understand and appreciate your comments about the impact on the neighborhood down the road. Thank you for sharing them. Other questions or comments from members of the audience on, yes, Mr. Baelish, please.
That gentleman brought up a good point. My son lives at 1760 Jeanette, and next to him they tore a house down, put a new house up, and they had their percolation test. They have tile. They don't have a sewer, and so they have a septic system. So they couldn't make it on a percolation test. So the engineer, city engineer, village engineer, came along and told them to put in 3 feet of fill on that property. And that also has increased the runoff quite a bit. It's kind of a goofy thing that what the village engineer told them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baelish. I don't know the specifics of that particular instance. I know generally speaking that in any project, we're not supposed to be increasing the runoff from any property onto any adjoining properties. And oftentimes, at least I have firsthand knowledge of one instance we actually improved the stormwater runoff in the area through the project. Other questions or comments from the audience? Questions or comments from the council? Commissioner Olson?
The DuPage County stormwater requirements on this lot, if were to be improved, I know we've talked at our last long-range planning meeting about those requirements. This lot would be less than 1 acre?
One of them's over. One's over, one's under.
Yeah.
So the lot that's over 1 acre would be required under DuPage County to adhere to their, it wouldn't be exempt from the DuPage County regulations. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Both properties would provide, are subject to the ordinance in this particular case, and both would adhere to, through the application process, we review or have a consultant review compliance with the stormwater ordinance as well as our local amendments, and both properties would be required to comply with the ordinance.
Commissioner Barnett?
I think what every property is required to comply. I think what David was talking about is the small partial exemption, which I think is an acre limit. And it doesn't mean you don't have to comply with the ordinance. It changes the rules for the resulting development analysis. And as I'm reading this, I believe that as proposed, lot 1 would be slightly over an acre and lot 2 would be under an acre. So lot 1 would have a different set of final requirements than lot 2 would.
Correct.
Nice.
I mean, I don't know if it would be helpful for the residents or not, but just sharing those requirements with the residents in that area, I think might be helpful so they can understand what the ordinance requires in DuPage County and the expectations that we have for those properties, or the county has for those properties.
I'm going to speak out of turn. That's a good recommendation. Remind me, do we have a resident-friendly synopsis on our website of the stormwater requirement? I know the county ordinance is newly adopted, and as a full waiver community, we implement and enforce the county ordinance through the Village of Downers Grove, so that people don't have to go to the county to get approval. They can work with our staff, which, trust me, is where you want to be. Trust me on that. But do we have something that sort of provides a kind of, I should look and know this, sort of that user-friendly?
We always have user-friendly descriptions and things like ordinances. The reality is the...
Can I throw you another softball?
I I took it as a softball. I think you threw a nice curveball at us, but the reality is we try to put user-friendly layperson's terms that summarize ordinances, and we have like cover pages on those things. But the technicality of the application of the countywide stormwater ordinance it can be pretty complicated, and it's certainly written for design professionals. That being said, what staff would like to do is clarify this issue. Our initial read on this is that because the subdivision itself is over 1 acre, the detention is required for all the lots in this subdivision. And we will verify that, and if we are incorrect, we will state why there's an exemption to the detention requirements and how that relates to the ordinance, and if it's required, we will explain how that is required.
Terrific. And that was user-friendly. Commissioner?
Thank you. I think it's also important to note that as currently configured, the properties could house, that's the wrong way to put it, but it could support another house. So from a stormwater perspective, that would probably be a less advantageous way to go than reconfiguring it and then dealing with the detention possibilities that the village manager was just talking about. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Jose, which is why generally we favor consolidations, because you can actually increase the standards that someone building there would have to meet, as opposed to what they could currently do, which might even be less attractive from a stormwater management standpoint. Commissioner Rankin?
And not to complicate things anymore, but so because the way that it's divided, one lot being smaller, one being bigger, it might be even more advantageous in regards to stormwater for these residents. Am I understanding that right?
That is correct, and we want to consider that when we make our final interpretation of how the ordinance applies to both of these resulting lots and how that issue comes into play.
But again, right now we're just talking about consolidating 3 lots into 2, but we do appreciate you're looking down the road. Any other questions or comments from the council on this item? Hearing none, then let's move to item 9D as in David.
Which is consideration of a rezoning on Indianapolis Avenue. Mr. David.
Correct. An ordinance has been prepared to permit a zoning ordinance map amendment to rezone the property at 2525 Indianapolis Avenue from R1 single-family residence to R4 single-family residence, and we're looking for approval on the August 13th, 2013 active agenda. Here's the approximate location of 2525 Indianapolis. Here is an aerial photograph. It is a vacant site currently, call your attention to the properties to the west, which is to the left of the yellow box. The setbacks there become key to the discussion. This property was part of the annexation, which was effective on January 1st, 2012, and all the properties enter as an R1 single family. We've had a few of these already come before you where the R1 wasn't really the appropriate designation. In this case, R4 single family residential makes more sense, provides more compatible setbacks with existing homes in the area. Under R1, a 40-foot setback, front yard setback is required. That would place the building significantly back into that corner, the southwest corner, compared with a 25-foot setback, which is required under R4. And in fact, that 25-foot setback, front yard setback, would bring it in line with other buildings to the west. And that's the change that the applicant is trying to achieve here. The Plan Commission considered this petition at its July 1st meeting again and unanimously recommended approval. Staff concurs. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this proposed rezoning? Questions or comments from the council? Very good. That takes us to item 9E as in Edward.
The final 3 items on tonight's first reading agenda are recommendations coming from Public Works and the Parking and Traffic Commission. And here to present all 3 of these items tonight is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
Good evening. I'll attempt to give you a very quick overview of these 3 traffic items. The first one is to designate a north-south mid-block pedestrian crossing on Brook Drive, and this was requested by Flavor Chem, who has several facilities along different sides of Brook Drive up there. This is north of Butterfield, behind the Best Buy up in that area, in this industrial park.
It's a Cornerstone Award winner.
Yes. The crossings don't really occur at street intersections. They cross mid-block where their facilities are, which line up with their doors. So staff has been working with them to identify a safe crossing that we can designate with a crosswalk. And so the purpose of this recommendation is to designate this by code as a mid-block crossing, which will allow us to put in a crossing, appropriate warning signs, and work with Flavor Chem, who will work with us to put up the curb improvements and make it all ADA accessible. This was presented to the TAP Commission June 9th, and they voted unanimously to approve this action, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about this one. Maybe I could present all three, and then we could...
Sure.
If that's okay. The second one is a request to provide one additional 15-minute short-term space in our downtown. This is on the south side of Burlington Avenue, west of Main Street, to serve the U.S. Bank primarily and the Caribou Coffee location, as well as other businesses right at this location. As you'll remember from the downtown parking study, we did implement 13 of these similar spaces throughout the downtown, and the recommendation of the downtown parking plan was to implement these on one block, one space per block on blocks that had appropriate high turnover type parking needs. And we have done that throughout the downtown on these blocks. This location didn't rise to that level at the initial implementation of these, but these businesses have seen how well they've worked throughout in other places in the downtown, and they've asked to have a similar space on this block of Burlington, and staff agrees that we think it would be a great addition for these high turnover spaces. This also was presented at TAP on June 19th, and they did also recommend approval of it. The third one is a request that came from DuPage County Department of Transportation, which is on Warrenville Road at Finley. If you're eastbound on Warrenville, there is directional signage to encourage people to turn right onto Cross Street and then to take a left turn to continue east on Ogden. Cross Street tends to get backed up during peak hour, and so many people continue east to Finley and then kind of try to weave their way across 3 lanes of traffic and turn left there on that short stretch of Finley to keep going east on Ogden. And unfortunately, that's creating a lot of gridlock and leading to a lot of delay there. A couple of years ago, the county went in and they put in a barrier curb there because people were actually trying to turn left, and that has helped. But this weaving has led to delay. The county recognizes this is not the total solution. They will be looking at this as part of a bigger study in the future to see what they can do to help traffic in this congested area. But they've asked us to implement this peak hour restriction on cars eastbound on Warrenville continuing eastbound on Ogden during the peak hour, which was presented also at TAP at the June 19th meeting, and TAP also recommended approval of this item. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of these 3 items that you have.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Nan. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items, 9E as in Edward, F as in Frank, or G as in Gus? Yes, sir, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Manfred, members of the council. I'm Chris Sarks, 1116 61st Street. And I'm a member of the Transportation and Parking Commission, but I'm not here tonight as a spokesman for them, and I don't presume to be communicating their viewpoint, but I would like to amplify to some extent our discussions on this last item, G, which, at least in our view, would not be completely solved, at least as an interim solution, which is all we're going for here, since the county apparently intends to take a much more long-term solution later. Because of the fact that Director Nolan mentioned of people who continue eastbound on Warrenville and then attempt to go east on Ogden, when in fact the only safe way to do that is to go south on Cross. So it was our view that in addition to the signage which is recommended in this for this ordinance, there would also be signage to the west of Cross on Warrenville saying that during these restricted hours, traffic proceeding east of Finley along Ogden must turn here. Otherwise, people are going to get down to the corner of Findlay and Warrenville and be kind of PO'd during those hours to find that they in fact cannot proceed with that intended movement. And if the first time they find that out is at that corner, then that's going to be a problem. So we had felt that there was some additional signage needed west of Cross. Now, that may be the county's responsibility and not the village's. I don't know who has responsibility for signage on Warrenville Road west of Cross, but that was our supplemental recommendation to the original proposal which came through from Public Works. Otherwise, we are in agreement. Thank you.
Well, thank you for emphasizing that point. Any other questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of these three items, 9E, F, or G? Same question then to any members of the Village Council. Questions or comments on any three of these items? Commissioner Barnett?
A couple of them. And I got to touch on each one here. On the Brook Drive crosswalk, I think you alluded to it, but I don't remember what the answer was. How's this going to get paid for? Are we going to do this, or is
We will do the
share?
striping and the signage, and Flavor Chem is providing the concrete
The curb depression work?
curb type work.
Where's it going to go? It looks like there's a sidewalk on the south side of that already, but nothing on the north, is that right?
We just completed some sidewalks this year up there. I can't remember which side of the street they're on, but we do have continuity. I can give you an exhibit that shows it.
I'm looking at maps that are probably old, so if there is, that's great. The downtown parking, is that what, and this is just kind of is that what the green stripes are for?
Yes.
I've seen those a couple times. I was wondering if that was like a test.
Penalty boxes.
They look sort of like penalty boxes, yeah.
They have green stripes to indicate 15 minutes.
So are those tests, or are those permanent, or what are those exactly?
We initially put in some dark green boxes. We replaced them with a brighter green, just to give them some more visibility and freshness. But that's really our thought and how we would mark them. They seem to be well used. I've seen a lot of turnover in those spaces. And
Last thing I had is, what do you think the long-term answer from the county is going to be on Warrenville? Because that is a ridiculous turn, and yet, we see lots of times where people just, signs, half the people are going to pay attention, half of them just don't care. And that's just a complete cluster when people try and make that turn.
I don't know what the long-term plan is going to be. I believe the county's plan is to hire a consultant, go through a full study and analysis. You have IDOT right there, you have the county there, you have us involved. It may involve Cross Street. I don't know what they're thinking.
I don't know why I'm there as often as I am, but almost every time I'm in that intersection in any kind of rush hour window, morning or afternoon, there are multiple people trying to make that turn. And it's glad we're trying to do something. I hope we add a voice to the conversation with the other groups that says it's got to be way more than signs.
This is just one step, like we said.
Commissioner Olson?
Yeah, just add that if we can work with the county to add the additional signage further west, and I think that is really that's very important, so that people, as they're approaching, are understanding, and I mean, I know it's not our responsibility, or we don't have the authority to do that, but if we can encourage them and work with them collaboratively, appreciate it.
Commissioner NEUSTADT.
Have we been experiencing any ticketing or any issues with the 15-minute spots? Any issues that have come up with people not coming and going out of those? You don't need the answer today because we probably don't have it, but just a quick report on that from the video truck.
I know in the interim it's been great because on the weekend when you can park in there anytime, people don't think they can park there, so it's been a great...
Just blew it.
Well, it's not going to last very long. It's been great. You always find a parking space. There goes the secret. Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you. I have two items. One is the Flavor Chem, I can't speak today, pedestrian crossing. I mean, this is a great public-private partnership with a great organization that has really put a lot of money in expansion in our community, and I'm glad to see that we're working with them. Is this crosswalk that they're proposing is it for pedestrian-only traffic, or is there a chance that they could be moving material? Because I know there's some hazardous materials that they work with. We saw that on the open house and the safety that they have there. But is this, and I'm not saying that they're going to do that or they can't do it, I just asked a question. Is it strictly for the movement of people from building to building, or is there a potential plan for that? At least we should ask the question so our emergency response is aware. The other question that I have is, I think it's great that we're getting more of these 15-minute and 15-minute parking spots. I saw that the plan that we adopted in 11 actually calls for more of these. We currently have, I think it was 13 I read. But my question though is, how do we enforce that? I didn't even know we had them, because I guess I'm colorblind. I didn't know they were lime green. So I guess I avoid those spots, or I don't park it.
To my point.
Yeah, I know you did say that. Well, really, how would we enforce that? I mean, especially if we can get more and more, because I could see other areas that need them. And I don't need an answer right now, but it's more of the enforcement side of it, especially as, you know, I've always said a parking problem is a great problem to have in our downtown. I think if we got some more of these strategically placed, you know, it's good to have it, but if we're not enforcing it, you know, like Commissioner NEUSTADT asked, I don't think they're useful then. They must be, because I didn't know they were theirs.
We'll get some information about the enforcement that's taken place since we striped them.
Great, thank you. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thanks. Commissioner Reagan? Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to echo the concern about Cross and Warrenville and Findlay. So I hope staff will stay on top of the county and as necessary IDOT, because that really is a dangerous situation. And while this is a nice move in the right direction, it really is just a half measure. That's all I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Terrific. No further questions on any of those items. That brings us to the end of our first reading or our workshop segment of our meeting tonight. It brings us to item 10, the mayor's report. I essentially gave my report earlier this evening, and so we'll go right to item 11, manager's report. Mr. Fielding?
We do have a manager's report this evening. We have the report for the first half of fiscal year 13, our current year, regarding some financial updates. And Deputy Village Manager Mike Baker will provide this report.
Mr. Baker.
I wanted to take a brief opportunity just to provide the council and the community with an update showing overall financial performance, primarily in the general fund through the second quarter of 2013. Again, this is going to be very high level, and there will be opportunities about a month and a half down the road is when we release our budget, so to dig into in much greater detail on the village's financial standing. But when we look at our general fund performance through the first 6 months of the year, and from the revenue standpoint, as you can see in the table here, we are exceeding what our expectations are by about $630,000. So we've seen strong revenue performance, and it primarily comes in the categories that you can see listed. Building permits, income tax, and sales tax have all been stronger than we're budgeted, at least for the first 6 months of the year. Other revenues at or near budget, based on 6-month performance. When we look at the expense side, we, on a budget of $41.6 million, expected to spend just under $20 million and have spent almost exactly $20 million. That number does exceed, so the actual expenses through 6 months exceed what was expected by $90,000. But I will point out in one of the notes that we wanted to emphasize, those expenses include the approximately $135,000 of unexpected expenses that we incurred for the storm event that occurred during the month of April. So obviously an unplanned activity that is reflected in our general fund expense number. But otherwise, all other expenses generally are tracking at or near budget. Again, much more information to come in about a month and a half, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from the council with respect to the information to date? Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, I've asked this to the manager, and I'll ask it publicly in relation to the flood expenses of $135,000. Why is it that we can't take portion of that, if not all of it, out of the stormwater utility fee?
We'll take a look and see if that's an option that's available to us. A lot of the expenses related to the flood are actually operational issues that we'll take a look and we'll consult our finance department, auditors, and other folks to see if we...
And like I said to you on the telephone, if it wasn't for the flood, we wouldn't have had those expenses. So I don't see why it is that we can't look at doing that or actually do it. So I would ask that we actually get a report out or some sort of response back, and not today or tomorrow, but when we get towards the end of the year, when we have to look at budget adjustments, we can get that answered.
Will do.
Thank you very much.
That's a good question, and we should look at that because I think other things will come up in the future that will beg that same question. And since we run the stormwater utility like an enterprise fund, I think we have to be careful that we don't set precedent because we have presented this as something that is an enterprise fund like the water fund or the parking fund where dollars in are applied to that particular use. And while at first blush it sounds logical that flood-related expenses or extraordinary flood-related expenses would fall in that category, I don't know the answer to that. So that is probably something we should look at because I can envision other circumstances, hopefully not like April of this year, may arise again. And I just want to make sure that we don't drift outside of what was represented as we have a box here that these dollars are being used to deal with certain types of things, and we don't want it suddenly becomes, to be very pedestrian about it, an ATM to deal with whatever happens to come up at the moment that we need to spend money on. I'm not suggesting that's what Commissioner Durkin is at all saying. It's a fair question, but just keep all that in mind.
This is the point counterpoint of why we'll seek some advice internally and externally, because both are correct. It was because of the flood and it is an enterprise fund. Just a quick preview.
There you go with the both again.
Yes.
But I think the key point there is the precedent set.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, because this whole stormwater utility fee is brand new.
Yes.
And there's a lot that's not known to all of us.
Correct.
Fair question.
So I think it's something we should at least look at.
And we will take a look at it, and this issue of how we deal with unexpected expenses in general will be front and center as part of the discussion of the FY14 budget, because it came up in long-range planning about the best use of reserves and risk management, and we've taken that as a directive, so this is sort of a precursor to the budget discussions that start in October.
Thank you. Not to hijack other people with questions, but as long as we're on that topic, what did we end up getting from FEMA in terms of public assistance?
Did they even close that out?
I don't think that has been closed out yet, but I think we're
tracking that they were extending the date, the submission.
Well, that was for the individual assistance, I think, but the public assistance, that may not be closed.
The public assistance, the final decision has not yet been made.
Okay, fair enough. Well,
And
then
we're anticipating it's 75%, and we will let you know when we get the final answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see. That is.
And that's
in fact with that. Okay, gotcha.
That's 75% of the 135?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, so it's not as bad as I anticipated.
Right, it's actually a pretty good story, and FEMA's been very helpful not only to residents of Downers Grove and other communities, but the municipalities themselves. Keep in mind, though, that the way that works is the expenses that we incurred will show up on the expense side, and then any funding will actually, from FEMA, will show up on the revenue side, and that's why both are up. And when you look net numbers, this is a good story, but may cause expenses to go over.
Yeah, to your point, Commissioner, the individual assistant request deadline, I believe, was extended for individuals submitting for their own personal residences, as opposed to municipalities. Harry, I'm sorry. Other questions or comments on Commissioner Barnett?
I just wanted to tag on to your comments, Mayor, about the newness and the precedent. I understand the process. We'll get some further discussion and some insight and come back with some comments and recommendations about how to handle it. I just would encourage us all to be thinking in the most conservative, narrowly defined terms, because it's awfully hard to find an activity, public works related, that is not somehow connectable should you choose to make the path to stormwater. So just, I feel better about making budget amendments than I would opening up a box so early in a system that we don't understand yet long term. So my 2 cents since you brought it up.
Thank you. Other comments on the status so far?
That ends our report tonight, Mayor.
Keep up the good work. Make us more money. Do both. Very good, thank you. Item 12 then on agenda, our attorney's report. Ms. Petrarca?
Thank you, Mayor. I have 5 items to present this evening. The first is an ordinance amending the zoning code to rezone the property located at 2525 Indianapolis Avenue, an ordinance restricting turns on Warrenville Road, an ordinance designating a crosswalk at Brook Drive, an ordinance establishing a 15-minute parking zone on Burlington Avenue, and an ordinance proposing the establishment of a special service area number 6, and providing for a public hearing and other procedures in connection therewith. They will all be on next week's agenda.
Terrific, thank you very much. That brings us to item 13, council member new business. Do any members of the village council have any items of new business they would like to present at this time? Hearing none, we'll move right to item 14. We cannot adjourn yet. We need to adjourn into executive session on 2 different fronts. So may I have a motion to convene into closed session pursuant to the appropriate statutory authorization?
We have 3 fronts tonight, Mayor. So I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C2 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider collective negotiating matters between the village and its employees or their representatives. Further, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C11 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider litigation affecting on behalf of the village which has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal. Further, I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C5 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the village or whether a particular parcel should be acquired.
Second. Any questions or comments? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner NEUSTADT?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Reinken?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are adjourned into closed session. Thank you and good night.